we are sort of stating the obvious here, that money affects what business does. And we have discovered about ourselves, as Alex pointed out, that we're a business just like any other business. But we're not. News in this country holds a different position. It's not just enough that it be there to sell cars, Alex, forgive me. It is there to inform the public, and inform the public on issues that may or may not be entertaining. And sometimes we're going to have to be a little bit dull, and I'm the last person to argue for dull. I often say I love Jim Lehre's program, but Jim and Robin McNeil used to say, you know, we dare to be dull, and sometimes I think they're a little bit too daring. I don't think you have to be dull to be substantive, but we have to be substantive. It's not enough that we just say we're getting an audience.
Can I jump in on
Please,
one
Vivian,
thing?
go ahead.
I just want to bring up,
By the way, that was much more than a golf clap, Ted, I gotta tell you. I was expecting a thunderous round of applause for that. Ted Kopp, there we go.
yeah,
You wondered about the sound of one hand clapping? You just heard it.
That's right. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to bring up another theme which gets very much to what you're saying, which is a change in the dynamics of the news business, and also very relevant to the concept of news literacy, especially among young people, which is a word that I've started to use in a context, in a meaning that I recently in the last few years that had a different meaning prior to the last few years, which is promiscuity. Now, promiscuity is something that, for my colleagues in the Times, that we talk a lot about, which is the notion that news viewers, news consumers today are much more promiscuous in their consumption of news from a variety of sources than ever before. And this gets at your issue of the editorial cartoon and Jon Stewart. Most, from a very narrow competitive point of view, we hate promiscuity. We want audiences that, whether when I was at the New York Times or now at NPR, we want them to just, only listen to NPR and only go to the NPR website. But that's just not the way audiences behave. So the concept of promiscuity and the way, and I think this is very relevant to news literacy, is that we have to think about how we help, people that are coming up and the digital natives to understand that they can get their understanding of news through this sort of constellation of news media. And it changes the business dynamics, and it changes the way that media is perceived.
Well, Neil, that actually is what Daily Me does. It's a combination of high-quality content and the ability to customize and personalize into your own news environment, correct?
And you're right. And I think part of what we're working to do better at is to elevate an understanding of the brands that are part of something like that. So when you come into that, it's not just a variety of sources that most people don't pay that much attention to. When I worked at Yahoo News, we would do research and we'd interview people, and most of them thought they were getting their news from Yahoo News. They weren't. They were getting it from AP or Reuters or dozens of other sources. And so I think there is an issue there of, in this sort of world of dipping in and out of various different places where you get your news, of understanding the source beyond the place you found it. So that a lot of the issues that were talked about this morning were about sourcing and understanding. There's another set of issues to some degree and around the source, meaning the news organization that fostered the creation of that piece of content, and how they get, how you recognize one source versus another and the quality of them.
Well, that's certainly in the interest of everybody at this table. The more people can make those distinctions, the better off a high-quality news organization.
Could I just clarify one thing? I mean,
Please.
This is something that I think is frustrating. I do not believe that appealing to viewers and being substantive are mutually exclusive at all. And I would argue that 60 Minutes this weekend, which did a profile at the FDIC and then two Lesley Stahl pieces on the accuracy of eyewitness testimony, were both very appealing. I didn't see the numbers, but also very substantive. And so I think that I don't think you have to be either or. I think you have to be both. And if you look at nightly news right now, it has never been more substantive, and we've never had more viewers. So, and to that point, sadly,
You've never had more viewers?
well, we have,
I bet you have.
Well, you want to know something? We're up from a year ago.
No. When you say never, I'll bet you back in the old days of Huntley Brinkley, you had twice the viewers.
That's possible and probable.
But, you know, but in television never means within the last couple of years.
Yesterday, since yesterday, we've
We've
not
never
had
had
more.
you.
Yeah, exactly.
Listeners.
That was the word, yeah, we, exactly.
I think one of the things you're raising, though, is part of what has happened, and we've unbundled the news, or we are starting to unbundle the news. And yes, a show like 60 Minutes has a pretty sizable audience, or the nightly news has a pretty sizable audience, and many of them will sit through it from start to finish, and they get all of that. But increasingly, as people are consuming more and more of their news online, they're making discrete decisions on various things. And when I was at Yahoo, we worked closely with 60 Minutes to bring a fair amount of 60 Minutes content online. We didn't bring the entire show. We were picking and choosing. Usually it was one segment from each week's show. And clearly the decisions we were making were partly based on, well, what did we think was going to work and resonate online? And then, of course, once we made that decision, we also could see at the end of it, you know, that one really bombed. People really didn't click through to that one. They weren't all that interested. They didn't spend time with it. And so the notion of journalism as the kind of sequential way of telling a story that has happened in prior media is starting to break down. And I don't know the answer yet. I don't know whether it's going to change, but you clearly can see that, you know, some of those pieces that are nice, good, you know, explanatory journalism that people will sit through when they're watching their television, they're not going to sit through, they're not even going to click to when you bring it online.